Buenos días, bienvenidos.
Welcome. My name is Nicolás Cardelino, and I worked in the Research and Development Department of GeneXus. I work with Java and with other items. This year, as I did last year, I'm going to be talking about the state of the web platform to develop applications. Last year, as an introduction, I said that if you take a photo of the web, it's like taking a photo of a group of kids that are constantly moving, practically impossible, so that they are all looking at the camera, for instance. Now this year, I have another metaphor to tell you about the state of the web. Is like going to a restaurant. You have an endless menu. You look at it and you're hungry and you want to eat everything, basically. And so that's what happened to me. I wanted to talk about many things, but we've only got half an hour, and in half an hour, I can't really cover everything I'd like to tell you. Anyway, I made a selection. I chose some topics that are, I think, important as app developers and for the type of apps that we do. They have to do with what we are researching in the R&D team at GeneXus. Those topics are grouped into four large groups. In the first place, I'd like to talk about browsers and what's happening in the browsers world and what news there are, what news there is. These browsers are our entrance door to the web. Then I'd like to refer to what's happening about user experience of our applications, because I think that there are some interesting things that are happening and that they are good to be adopted in our development. In the third place, I'd like to tell you what's happening in the world of manual development. Frameworks that we are using for single-page applications. That these are frameworks of JavaScript. They are useful to develop apps running in the browser. That is front end. I'm focusing on the front end. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the state of PWAs, and we've been talking about this every year, and we focus on it a bit more every year because they are being consolidating as a trend, and I'd say this year they are a reality. So those are the four large topics. Let's just start with the browsers. Well, the players go on being practically the same. The browser that has the largest market share by far is Chrome for mobile apps and for desktops. Although other browsers have started including functionalities which are not core but are useful, such as trackers or ads blockers, such as Firefox or Brave. Even Opera has a NTN included. Chrome is the leader, and it's going to continue being the leader. It's not going to be threatened by any other browser in the short, medium, and long term. I think this graph is quite clear. It goes on growing and growing, and the others are being reduced. The one that's kept quite up is Safari, and it's the one that we can use, but well. Now, what's interesting, late last year, there was something quite interesting. Microsoft announced that its Edge browser that replaced Internet Explorer is going to use the Chromium project as its browser engine. It means that Edge is going to be basically a Chrome. And as a developer, for me, that was an incredible piece of news. It was like a goal in a football field. Although it was better than Internet Explorer, it has its own features. There were things that you had to focus on a little bit longer. And then on the other hand is one platform less to be tested. Now, there are always two sides of the coin. As a web user, you also tend to wonder, is it good for a manufacturer to have such a power on browsers, which are, as I said, the entrance door is what we use to be able to surf the web, to browse it. Let's hope that Google does good use of that power, and that we shouldn't forget that Google is a company that lives on selling advertisements, and they're going to be successful when selling them if they have a clear idea of how users like or behave, or etc. And so let's hope that they are responsible. This is just a brief overview of what's happening with browsers. The piece of news that is the most important one is that Edge is going to be similar to Chrome. Then there are several talks in this event about design systems. Now, what we can see now is that design systems are more and more used, not only by companies or large computing or IT companies like Microsoft, IBM, or ABB, but what I'm going to show you in a minute is that it's not only IT companies, but organizations of all kinds are adopting design systems to empower the work between designers and developers, and to be able to provide better continuity in user interfaces and user experience in their apps. For those of you who haven't attended these talks, just a brief introduction to design systems. Well, what are design systems? Well, they are a group of guidelines or processes or patterns that are defined in order to establish how the user, what the user interface is going to be like in an app. Some design systems go even beyond that, and they define more concrete things such as controls and components that must be used to develop apps. And in that way, we ensure consistency and the possibility of transfer in the design that the designer gives us to the developer, and an increase in productivity. As I said, more and more companies are using design system. This page is called Adele. It's a repository of design systems that are publicly available. You can go and see them and test them and see what they are, how they are made. And you can see in this repository that there are companies such as Royal Canin making food for pets, and other companies making vehicles. There, you have the kingdoms of the United Kingdom and other kingdoms, Estonia and so on. And AHESIC has also a design system. So this is quite interesting. This is something that we have to focus on and pay attention to. We've been talking about this for a while. There was a presentation yesterday by Gabriel Simonet. He went quite deeper into it. Please see it. It must be already uploaded. You can see it in the event site or in your mobile apps. Now, what's GeneXus doing, trying to take advantage of this new way of facing this work, integrating design to the development process? We are working on the design system object. It allows us to work in our knowledge base, where we'll be able to define the tokens. Let's say they are variables, where you can say, well, the colors I'm going to be working with are these, the spacing is going to be like this, the borders, these are the sources, this is the size, the font size, and so on. You'll define everything. And you're going to define the controls and the elements and the components that are going to be used in that design system. And I can say, well, this is going to be my button, and this is going to be my button, and with the HTML that I want, or with the mark that I want. And you can also define the group of styles of the app. Just think of the design system object as an evolution of the old. Perhaps it's too soon to call it old. It's the theme, go into the object, a new way of looking at the design. We've got a presentation in this room, Ballroom B, at 12:15 by Maxi and Juan. Then we have the user control object, which isn't, well, it's relatively new. It's a year old. It's an object that allows us to define our own controls in our knowledge base. We used to have user controls, but they were developed outside the knowledge base, and there was an API that was a bit lower, of a lower level. This one gives you, the object gives you a higher level API, and controls live in that knowledge base. Now, how can we, or what's the relation between the user control object and the design system? Well, it gives us the possibility of including controls established or defined in third-party design systems in our knowledge base. We can easily transfer a component and include it in our knowledge base and use it as any other control in our knowledge base. There are also presentations about this. On the fourth floor in the conference room, Federico Salimon is going to be telling you about a very practical case with code that is very well landed, I would say, down to earth, and how he used a user control object to implement what you can see next to the list of talks. I don't know if you've seen the big screen there. He did that. He made that screen with a user control object, and he's going to tell you how he did it. There was also a presentation yesterday, which is not going to go so much down to earth, but he did refer to user control objects to integrate the design system of a SAP, which is called SAP U5, so that users of SAP GeneXus can design integrated apps and in the SAP system with these controls. Another important issue which we've been working on is the process, to facilitate the process of integrated design to development, that is carrying designs to the final app. And sometimes you hear that a good designer should know how to program, or should have some programming knowledge, because in that way it'll be able to communicate better with the development team, and it'll understand better how developers will implement his or her design and take it down to reality. We think that that shouldn't really be the case, although it's useful. The more knowledge someone has, the better. At GeneXus, we believe that we have to automate what's automatable, and designers needn't know how to program. They have to know how to use the tools to program. They have to be able to take their designs to the app. And that's why we are working on being able to transfer design, a design made with Sketch, to GeneXus. We've already done this for smart devices, and now we've got it for web apps. This is a design that was transferred from web Sketch to GeneXus. Sketch on the left-hand side was transferred to GeneXus. I think this is wonderful. I don't know what you think. Juan Michelini is going to be talking about this today in this same room at 11:45. So far, so good. This is what I wanted to tell you about design and user experience. I would like now to share something with you, about frameworks and single-page applications and the development of front ends. So that's where we believe that most interesting things are happening. But before that, I'd like to talk about TypeScript. TypeScript is a language that was developed by Microsoft. It's a superset of JavaScript that adds, inter alia, some icons, and it looks for increasing the productivity of developers. And what we can see is every single year, TypeScript is getting more people and developing more. I read a tweet by the creator of user script, and they said that that version, the version that he was developing, was using TypeScript, and we are confirming what's happening to us. For some time, all new web developments in GeneXus are using TypeScript, and our plan is to migrate some developments in JavaScript, like standard classes of JavaScript. You all know it, Israel, and we are going to develop it now in TypeScript. And now, leaving TypeScript aside, let's move on to the framework. React, user and Angular. There's not much news about leadership. User, yes, is the one that has the largest option. It's being used by more developers. It's used a lot, but it's not the same as React that is leading the market. And also, it's the satisfaction level of its developers. Yes, the developers are the ones that are more satisfied with their development frameworks. And then on the other hand, we have Angular. It's the framework that gives us, or that gives developers working with this type of frameworks, with batteries included, as we say it. It comes a full solution, comes in with a full solution. I don't have to worry about setting up the solution of the project. It brings in everything, and you can manage your development. Now, the three of them, React and the other two, go on working in three large areas to increase developers' productivity, and the second and the third is to increase the speed and to make the bundles lighter. That is, to be able to create apps that work faster and that are loaded faster when I have access to, independent of whether the connection is fast or slow. And I'd like to open up a parenthesis here, open brackets here, to talk about some myths in relation to frameworks. The first myth is that many times, and I've heard people say, well, if I design with these frameworks, the use and feel of this app is going to be nice. The look and feel is going to be nice. User experience is going to be good. That doesn't matter, really, if I do it with these frameworks or with more traditional techniques. The user experience, to have a look and feel that is good, is a lot of work. It means to having a multidisciplinary team to work with designers, to see how that design is transferred to reality, and not so much with the framework that is used, so that your application looks nicer. And the other myth is that if I use one of these frameworks, my app is going to be fast. That's not the case. To make a fast application, you have to work hard, independent on the thing that you use. If you look at Angular performance, you're going to read thousands of articles about techniques and practices, how to set up the architecture of the app to make it fast. It's not included. It takes a lot of work. It's not that it's out of the box. I'm closing brackets here. And now I'd like to talk about web components. That's a standard of GeneXus, which allows us to capsule JavaScript and others to the HTML that we have created. And this means that I can create an HTML that it's my button and say how I want the styles to be, how I want it to behave. I can encapsulate and make a bundle and others to use it. And I can say my button shift, and with HTML I'm using that button that I've used. This is a new way of putting components in the web, and it's a standard. It's more and more adopted. Chrome supported it. Firefox this year completed all APIs of the standard. Edge is no longer a reason for concern because it's going to be Chrome soon. And then Safari, although they're not very explicit in public about their plans, we are optimistic that quite soon it will implement all APIs. But there is something to be taken into account. Web components work independent of whether all browsers have all the APIs, because there are polyfill theory that allows you to cover what browsers don't have, so that web components can work. So they work even if APIs are not implemented. According to Ghana, there is an article that Gaston shared with me. According to Ghana, if you have to choose a framework of the ones I've mentioned, Ghana suggested that if you're going to choose a framework, you have to choose one that has a strategy around web components, and we fully agree. At GeneXus, we've adopted web components for some time now for several projects. One of them is called the GeneXus Web Controls Library, with which we are creating the new Angular controls. All the controls, combos, addition, and so on, are written as a web component, standard web component. They can be used in that generator, or they can be used with HTML, or manually, or written manually, or with any other generators that we may create tomorrow. So that's our focus, to have that level of componentization, independent of the framework that you use to develop it. And we've adopted it in our control library, and also to develop the new layout editor component. We are making a new layout component using this technology. And since we're talking about this, please visit our GitHub space. You're going to see these projects. They are open source, and you can see how we are developing them, and there are others that could be of interest. And since I'm talking about what we are doing, we've been working with Angular generator for some time. We have lots of news to share with you. But I'm going to be talking about this. It's Alejandro is going to be talking about this. He's going to be talking about Angular generator, and he has other pieces of news up his sleeve. So please stay on, because Alejandro will be talking about it. Let's talk now about progressive web applications, PWA. I mentioned it last year as a trend. Now it's no longer a trend, it's a reality. PWAs are something that in some way, when Google started making noise about it, well, there are other large players like Microsoft and that are supporting this initiative. Now, what's a progressive web application? Now, the shortest version I can share with you is that it's an app that provides users with an experience like a native application. It's a web application that brings the same experience as a native application. If I go a bit deeper, it's an application that behaves in a reliable manner, independent of the characteristic of the data connection, if there is a collection, if there is a high-end or low-end device, whether there is a lot of battery or low battery. It's an app that responds very fast, and it offers a very attractive and immersive experience for users. Now, to be able to make a web application have the same levels of integration with the device requires browsers to implement many APIs. And for that, to that end, we have Project Fugo, where we have Google and Microsoft and others behind it. And the idea is to reduce the gap between the group of APIs that web applications have to interact with devices and the ones that devices have in their native applications. At present, we have many APIs. There are many more still, and the idea is to generate the necessary standards to implement APIs in all browsers. And due to this, thanks to this, we'll be able to make things as for native apps to access to contacts or SMS messages. And of course, we have to follow the permit models and in the web and respecting user privacy. Now, a PWA has certain features. If I develop a PWA, how do I know that I got there, that my app complies with the criteria to be called a PWA. Now, to that end, we have Lighthouse. It's a tool included in Google Chrome. In the Google Chrome development tools, there is a part that is called Audits, and we can have access to that part to run some tests on our web application, and they can tell us whether we comply with the criteria to be considered a PWA. In GeneXus 16, we started generating PWA in these browsers by clicking on some properties in a web object. You'll have an app that complies with all the criteria in Lighthouse. This is an app called Kaufmann-Mead. It's an example. You can download it, generate it, and you'll see that if you run the Lighthouse test, you'll see that all the criteria are complied with. Now, why is it good for me? What's my benefit? Well, one benefit is that I can install it. The browser invites me to install it. Or in the case of Chrome, with the plus button, I can install it next to the toolbar. And what happens is that I get an icon on my desktop, at least in desktop browsers, and I can open that icon. The app is opened in its own window, independent of the browser. It has its own window, and it could also have a play screen if you configure it. And the same thing happens with mobile devices. If I start browsing, I can install the app. An icon is created in my home screen, and if I open it, it has its own screen as any other native apps. Now, we have a tool by Microsoft called PWA Builder. If I give the URL of a PWA, that app generates the packages in order to publish the app in Windows Store, Android Store, Mac, and iOS stores. So that tool automatically generates the packages, and I can publish it in the stores very easily. And to conclude, the Angular generator also generates PWA. So come on, let's do it. This is what I wanted to share with you today. That is all. Thank you very much.